Okay, soulmates, plenty to discuss on this Thursday, January 26th. Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. We are honored to stand behind this desk each day to take you on a journey across Black America and the stories that impact our people.
Bringing you our views, our news, and our voice. Topping today's headline takes us to Chicago as fire crews are continuing recovery efforts after a deadly 4-alarm fire broke out in a high-rise apartment on the city's south side. The fire spread to 6 floors of that building, sending flames shooting out of windows, as you can see here. Officials say the fire started on the 15th floor and impacted units all the way up to the 24th floor. One resident was found dead and about a half dozen people were injured, including a firefighter.
In Florida, 2 men have been sentenced for their role in a federal hate crime. Roy and Robert Lashley were originally charged with assault and battery after an attack in the parking lot of a Family Dollar store. A federal grand jury later added the hate crime charges. According to court records, the victim was walking out of the store when he heard someone yelling racial slurs. Prosecutors say the Lashleys then ran toward him, struck him in the face, knocked him to the ground, then beat him with an axe handle. Both men will spend over 3 years in jail. All right, my goodness. A new Minnesota task force is now the first in the country to examine why the statistics on missing and murdered Black girls and women are so high, and it's all being led by State Representative Ruth Richardson. In the U.S., it's estimated there are more than 60,000 Black women and girls who are considered missing. Now, according to Minnesota Public Safety, while 13% of Minnesotans are African American, about 30% of murder victims are African American women. Representative Richardson has introduced a bill that would create an office solely focused on missing and murdered Black women and girls. The task force is expected to wrap up its work by the end of the year. The past year has been pure agony for the family of Zion Foster. It was this time last year where authorities were searching for the missing 17-year-old. Now the person who was spending time behind bars in connection to her disappearance is once again a free man. And now Zion's mother wants answers as to why. Fox 2 Detroit's Brandon Hudson has the story.
This is absurd, it's unfair, and it's not just.
Sierra Milton is reeling over the release of Jalen Brazier, who's likely the last person to see her daughter alive. Brazier was released from prison Tuesday, 9 months after he was sentenced for lying to investigators about Zion Foster's disappearance.
Why is this man free? What? I can admit to this and still be let free.
Zion went missing after leaving home in East Point to visit Brazier, who's her cousin, in Detroit last January. As friends, family, and police searched for her, Brazier told East Point investigators he did not know where she was or what happened to her. He later admitted to putting her body in a dumpster and claimed she stopped breathing while they were smoking marijuana.
I was on panic mode ever since that happened. Her mom at one point talked to me and I couldn't bring myself, like, your daughter just died. What do I do?
Brazier was sentenced to 23 months to 4 years in prison for lying to police, but ended up spending 9 months behind bars. His early release the result of a 90-day special alternative incarceration program, which Macomb County Judge Edward Servito approved.
That boggles my mind for the judge to give a more aggressive term because of hearing the case and finding out what Jalen said he did. It could be signed off and I not be notified.
A group of Detroit police officers dedicated their entire summer to searching for Zion's body in a Macomb County landfill, but never found her. Chief White says DPD's investigation is not over.
That case is still wide open. We think we've got a strong suspect for that case. Our detectives are constitutionally doing everything they can to talk to him, investigate him, visit with him, to make sure that we get what we need to charge that case the way it needs to be charged.
In the meantime, No body means no determination as to how Foster died, and no closure for a mother still mourning and still desperate for answers.
What I want is I want justice. I want him to pay, and I want the truth to come out.
And correction, that was Randy Wembley who reported. Our thanks to him. Police are still investigating and searching for Zion. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you updates right here on Fox Soul. What just a terrible story. And on one hand, you know, there's been a lot of folks who have been organizing for criminal justice reform and for judges to have more discretion when it comes to sentencing. But, you know, this may look like a case gone wrong where sentencing for such an egregious crime and an egregious crime without notifying, you know, the families of the folks impacted. You know, this is an example of, you know, what some call reforms gone too far. Well, moving along, voters are putting pressure on Congress to take solution-driven action when it relates to gun violence across the nation. Last year, President Biden signed what's been called the most comprehensive gun bill in about 3 decades. The bipartisan legislation boosts funding for mental health resources and aims to prevent dangerous people from getting guns. But many lawmakers say the chances of a divided Congress coming together to push for more gun restrictions, it's looking pretty slim.
And there's a new lawsuit against the city of Joliet, which sits right outside of Chicago, and its former police chief. This all comes after 36-year-old Anthony Sanat, who is black, applied to that police department, but his application was allegedly rejected due to a domestic battery arrest. He alleges the Joliet police chief said he didn't want to hire another black male, in addition to the city's hiring other non-black officers who had histories of domestic violence incidents as well. Now, according to his federal lawsuit, the city of Joliet had at least 10 job openings on its police force in 2019, and Anthony Sanat later discovered he ranked number 5 out of the 227 eligible candidates.
A YMCA in Southern California was the scene of a protest over a transgender woman's use of a woman's locker room. A 17-year-old girl says she was traumatized by the presence of the transgender woman in the locker room. That led to protests by people who say the transgender woman should not be allowed in the woman's locker room, while others showed their support for the LGBTQ community. The YMCA released a statement saying it is committed to inclusion and also apologized to the 17-year-old girl for not providing enough support to her. The YMCA also said it will be reviewing its locker room floor plans to ensure everyone has access to additional privacy if needed. And
well, it's a dicey situation because I understand, you know, both sides. You know, as transgender, you identify as, you know, the opposite, if you will, gender you were born with. And then, you know, people being concerned that, you know, biologically, you know, we're talking about restrooms and locker rooms and things of that nature. If you still have the biological parts of that gender you were born with, how that can be of some concern if it's supposed to be for a locker room for people who share the same body parts. So it's such a dicey situation, and I try to be very careful and try to be very respectful, especially when there was a lot of debate as to the athletes. If you are transgender and maybe you know, were born male, is it fair to compete, you know, in female athletic meets and games and things of that nature? I don't know. It's a gray area for me because I understand both sides.
Yeah, and this has been a source of you know, political upheaval. Folks sort of making a big to-do about trans folks in bathrooms that align with their gender identity. You know, we've seen a huge effort to address this in places like North Carolina and other places across the country. And, you know, there have been very few cases, if any, you know, of, you know, anything untoward happening at the hands of transgender folks in restrooms. But, you know, this is a 17-year-old young girl, and, you know, her experience is also valid. And so, you know, hat tip to the YMCA, for seeing both sides of this issue and doing what they need to do to address it so that everybody feels like they belong.
It's definitely.
That's ultimately where we want to land on this, where everybody feels like they belong. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on the story.
I was going to say it's definitely an ongoing conversation and debate. Let's move to Florida now, Daytona specifically, where Black residents along Willie Drive still have tarps on roofs, storage units in yards, and debris on the street as people are trying to rebuild following severe weather. But it's a real struggle as entire neighborhood blocks have been displaced, as you can imagine. Fox 35's Dave Puglisi has the story.
Talk about it and I get a little emotional.
Anthony Lee showed us these pictures of the inside of his mother's home. The walls were covered in mold and had to be gutted. They've spent every dollar they have in the bank, and he's doing his best to repair everything on his own. But the costs are adding up.
But I think when you turn it over, you got nothing to worry about. You guys, just believe that it'll be all right. So it's hard though, man. It really is.
Lee has lived on the street for 35 years. He has seen new developments nearby being built up on higher ground, putting them at the bottom of what feels like a bowl.
I think geographically, the way Daytona Beach is set up, by being in the bowl, you had to raise everything in the bowl to keep the edge from flooding out.
Just a few blocks over, an entire neighborhood of over 100 families has been displaced. The Caroline Villages has been boarded up. City Commissioner Paula Reed believes this has forced some children out of school.
So children may not be able to attend their regular schools or go to school or get to school for that matter, because they may be out of the area where the bus may normally come and get them. Their parents may not have transportation. The case is just, it affects the entire family.
Reed is aware of the new construction causing issues in some of the lower lying areas. She is hoping the Corps of Engineers can take a look at how to protect areas like Willie Drive.
Is it devastating? Yes. Is it a shame? Yes. However, you are still here, and those things again can be replaced. And because of that, let's continue to strive to get back to where we were.
And to help families rebuild, the city of Daytona has set aside $2.5 million in funding. Homeowners can apply to receive up to $9,000 in support.
A school cafeteria worker at Jewel M. Sumner High School in Louisiana is behind bars after she was caught selling more than lunch to students. Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, 45-year-old Timitrika Cohens was arrested after being accused of selling edibles containing marijuana. Someone reported her actions through a tip line. The Tangipahoa Parish School Superintendent said this week that the safety of students is the utmost importance to their school system. Cohens was reportedly hired by a staffing agency to fill in when regular employees in the cafeteria were absent. Oh, wow. So now we got to be on the lookout for the lunch lady, because she may be offering people a little more than lunch.
So are we assuming she knew that they were laced with, cannabis, or are we assuming she knew?
I'm assuming she knew. If she was selling it, right? It's one thing if she was giving out treats and wasn't aware of it, but clearly she was selling it and probably making a little extra cash on the side.
Yeah. But I say that because this goes back to the argument that, some of that stuff is too kiddie-like, and when you talk about gummies and things of that nature, the reason she may have been able to succeed as long as she did before that tip line came in is because, you just think of it as candy. You don't think of it as anything else. So I'm assuming she knew as well. I was just being a little facetious, but I can see how that could kind of go unnoticed, as it probably did for a moment, because those cannabis items are in such a variety to whereas, they remind me of candy that, little kids would eat. I mean, who hasn't had a gummy worm, or a gummy bear, or all the other Rice Krispie treats, all the other ways that cannabis can show up. So I just feel like moving forward, and as this thing becomes more of a thing, there just needs to be, just a way to distinguish what is what.
Yeah, and I'd venture to say that the cafeteria lady probably knew that she shouldn't be selling, cannabis-laced treats to the kids, right? And so we need the lunch ladies out there to do better. and keep our kids safe. I mean, you never know. A lot of kids have allergies, and you never know how their bodies may react to it. And so, luckily, none of the kids, were harmed or experienced any adverse reaction according to our reporting. But that could have happened.
It
right?
could have.
And it's important that our cafeteria ladies stick to their job.
I'm assuming this is a very, rare case.
I hope so.
I would hope so too. It's just the candy. It looks like candy. It's the candy thing that gets it for me. All right, still ahead, a historic year for Obamacare, the milestone they achieved this week.
Plus, experts issuing new warnings regarding some of our favorite snacks. Speaking of snacks, what they say could be impacted by junk food. More when we come back. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.
Non-cannabis snacks.